having a neurodiverse brain allows you to think in a way that is really fun. The pictures that come up in your head and the things that you think of, and you go on random tangents and all sorts of things. Like I think it just makes things quite interesting.
I'm Robin Johnson, this is Yours for the Making, and I'm joined by Ella Fielding.
I don't even remember being very like, oh, I'm going to be a carver. And then I found this and was like, oh, that's what it feels like. That's amazing.
This show tells the story of the makers, the people that create things, whether it's in wood or metal, whether they're artists or musicians or chefs. It doesn't matter. I'm going to tell their story.
For me personally, I think with my hands. I think when I'm doing stuff, my brain then kind of goes off on a journey. And actually to do it in that step it doesn't unlock my thoughts because I don't know what I'm thinking until I'm doing the making.
I'm Robin Johnson, this is Yours for the Making, and I'm joined by Ella Fielding, chainsaw artist, sculptor. I could go on, by the way. I don't want to embarrass you. But an inspiration to many, many people, Ella, you are. Your story of kind of how you got to where you are, which we'll go through hopefully in a minute, is a really interesting one, and you followed quite a unique path to get there, I'd say. And what you do every day, you kind of battling a stereotype and a norm. You're a girl, you're in full protective gear, and you're holding a massive chainsaw, carving up bits of wood into quite fantastic, incredibly creative sculptures. So it's an inspiration to me. It's an inspiration to many.
Thank you.
How did it all begin?
I think, the actual bit of me starting carving was I was doing a degree in sculpture, and they set me a task of, unfortunately they don't do this anymore, which is really frustrating, but I was the last year where you could either do a dissertation or you could work with a practicing artist and keep a journal. And I was like, so I literally keep a diary? And they were like, yeah. I was like, oh, I'll do that one. And I'd remember seeing a couple of carvers. Like my parents used to take me to Glastonbury to the festival, and I'd seen some carvers there like years ago, and it sort of like gone like there in my brain, and I'd kind of not really thought about it. But I did have a picture of this carving that I'd seen. I think it was about 13 or something. And yeah, when I was about 20, they were like, yeah, so you can work with a practicing artist. And I don't even remember being very like, oh, I'm going to be a carver. I just remember being like, well, would be a really interesting thing to hang out with people for a term and explore, and kind of found the people that had made it and asked if I could hang out with them. And they're this amazing group where they're dressed as pirates, and they're all kind of very out there, which is brilliant. And then I had to counter that with somebody else's style of chainsaw carving. So I ended up going with this guy called Ben, who like lived off the land in this like amazing kind of bent tent thing, and it was really, really cool. But his way of doing things was very calm. Like you took all the bark off first, you kind of know what you're doing before you start. It was very, very methodical, and I was like, okay, great, yeah. And then I went and worked with the tree pirates, and they were like, nah, just gotta go for it. And I was like, I like the way that they're doing it. That's quite fun. And they were like, right, your turn. And I was like, oh, okay, how'd it go? I was like, oh, God, this is amazing. And I realised it's the first time you talk, I don't know, lots of people, especially when they're creatives, they seem to, I think, when you're like learning what you're doing, you always feel, well, I think I always feel like an imposter, to be honest, but I think you always think, how do other people like know themselves so well? And they have this like affinity with, I don't know, painting or photography or whatever. And I hadn't really found the thing, and everyone else seemed to, and I was like a bit jealous of them. And then I found this and was like, oh, that's what it feels like. That's amazing. And it was this kind of moment, and I realized actually carving is quite similar to sort of other mediums that are quite fast, like welding, where you have a thought and an action, and you go, I wonder what this would be, and you go, and then you go, okay, that's awful, actually, don't do that, or whatever. But you kind of have that like instant feedback of creativity. And I think I realised that my thoughts are quite fleeting, and if I don't catch them, they've gone. And actually that kind of like immediacy of making is really helpful with a saw or with welding, because you can have that in interaction with your material and respond quickly and catch it. And then you can decide quickly after that if it doesn't work. And you've not like put all of this time into something and come out the end and gone, I don't like it. So I think that kind of way of making was just so exciting. And it's probably a bit of an adrenaline thing, and like, yeah, it was just really fun. So I found that, and and ended up doing that as my final piece in my degree. So I was in Camberwell. It was like all the buses going by, everyone was getting annoyed about how much space they had in the studio, and I had this entire car park where I was like carving in the car park. So it was such a revelation. It was amazing. And then I realized as well, these guys were doing it and they were getting work, and I could see a path to like how that would actually translate in the real world, which is what, like, had I have done like an essay, not to shade anything on like reading other people's works or devouring it and digesting it and stuff, but at that point I couldn't have seen a way to translate that into actual real life. And I think I'm one of the few people that was in my course, or the few people that I know that studied their creative field that is actually doing a job in it, which is a shame. But I think that kind of, I don't know, it kind of translated it into how I can actually operate in the real world as a maker and not have another job. Don't know. So it was an incredible thing, and they don't do it anymore, which is a shame. But
I think when I consider degrees in sculpture or fine art and those kind of subjects and disciplines, there isn't really a defined career path. You don't kind of go to uni, go and do fine art or sculpture and go, right, I'm going to be a sculptor.
Yeah.
Because it's very difficult unless you're kind of top of your class and you're doing all those Telegraph and Guardian interviews as you're graduating, and you've been put under the wing of a gallery owner or promoter or someone like that. It's really, really hard to kind of carve. Excuse the pun,
it is true.
to carve your name in there.
Yeah,
it's really, really difficult. And I think there's hundreds of people graduating every year with these degrees, or even further, masters or whatever.
Yeah.
And but it also seems like such a departure from a very traditional learning space, especially sculpture, fine art. You're in a small studio, it's well lit, you've got all your little tools, and whether you're sculpting clay or whatever it is, and then to be yielding a petrol chainsaw, sawdust flying everywhere and stuff, it seems like a total departure from that kind of, not finesse, because you can still finesse a chainsaw and you do very well. But when people, I guess, imagine a sculptor, you imagine someone just delicately doing little bits, or maybe welding something together. Got a good friend, Lee Dyer, he's a metal sculptor, and he welds stuff. Really incredible guy. But the same sort of thing, you can't really imagine him. I can't imagine him anyway, doing his degree course and kind of doing little maquettes. But then
even less than that, when you are often doing the course, you don't necessarily get taught about the materials. There's not a lot of it's about how you think, which is completely valid and really important. But you then when you're learning how to kind of think and conceptualize, then if you've had an idea that involves a type of material, then you can seek out the technicians and they will help you learn how to do it. But I think for me personally, I think with my hands, I think when I'm doing stuff, my brain then kind of goes off on a journey, and actually to do it in that step it doesn't unlock my thoughts, because I don't know what I'm thinking until I'm doing the making. And I think that kind of it is helpful in a way if you had like a more of a practical element to it, which then for me unlocks that kind of thing, which is where like apprenticeships are really amazing and stuff like that. Because I think, I don't know, I can't think the thoughts with my brain. I need to think it with my hand, and then stuff emerges, and and actually I might not be thinking about what I'm making, but pictures emerge that are sometimes disconnected, but you're suddenly and then kind of have a thought. But I don't know, there's I think it's it doesn't necessarily help a way of thinking. It's quite a sort of, the education generally has quite a narrow pathway to who it unlocks, whereas I think, doing the more practical things, which why when I had the access to work with an artist, it suddenly just everything made sense and it unlocked it all. But
do you think if you'd had that experience and that opportunity at 16 or 18, let's say, when you finished your A-levels, that you may have just done that rather than going to university?
Well, I kind of did have it in a way, because I actually left school when I was 14. It wasn't working at all. They didn't know I was dyslexic. They definitely didn't know I was ADHD. I didn't know any of that stuff. They just thought I was naughty. And actually, I think I was just desperately frustrated, really stressed, found the whole environment just could not, it wasn't working. And mum and dad were amazing. They knew that I wasn't fundamentally bad, but they could see that I was like crumbling and becoming a person they didn't recognise. And they found there's this college I went to Kingston College, and it was amazing. They had this class called Pathfinders, which was for like school refusers or people that hadn't managed to get their GCSEs. And I sat mine, much fewer of them in at the time when, so I did it at the right time, but like a lot less of them at a time when other people were doing their retakes. But it meant that I entered a college that had college facilities, and also the teacher was called Catherine, not Mrs. blah blah. So the hierarchy thing was like just squashed. And then if you didn't want to come in, you just called an absent hotline. I was like, hang on a second, I still have to do the work. It seems I might as well just go in. It sort of completely took away all of the barriers that had been there. And then also I meant I could do a photography GCSE. And so I was like in the dark room with all the chemicals and like doing all the, and so the kind of things I could choose. And I did a geography GCSE, and we went out caving and like physically went, so the things that I discovered were like the land and the earth and touch, and I became obsessed with learning. And then because I was there, they had this whole, it went on to, you could do your foundation there as well. So I stayed there the whole time. So when I was doing my GCSE, we had a plaster room, and we had so it was literally it was basically, I had an access finally to all of these spaces, and it was an amazing, change, because as soon as I'd left that school environment, I loved learning and I loved being there, and I loved, and all I just wanted to do was make stuff. And it was like being at play school again, but with great facilities. So, and I think then uni was probably just a continuation of that, and also avoiding life, which was fun.
I guess it would be a similar environment to what you just described.
Yeah,
if you go and study art or an art-based degree at a university, it's kind of similar.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. But I don't think it has to be a degree per se. I think accessing facilities. I mean, I recently discovered a place that was like a maker space.
Oh, yeah.
And it's amazing. It's like the same thing, kind of, so you don't necessarily need to be at university. You need to learn how to think conceptually or critically and have access to other people that do that. But I think the way that we have access to people now and social media and things like that, if you use it to its better, you can form your networks that do that. You can kind of find places that you connect with people and that you can talk about that, so you can kind of instigate those environments if you wanted necessarily, but not have to pay the uni fees. But it's different, isn't it?
I totally agree with you. I think the education system, typical state school, primary school and secondary school, funnels people into GCSE. At 13, I had no idea what I wanted to do. No. I mean, I'm 40 and I still haven't got much of a clue. But at that age, you've got to make decisions that then define a lot of your future.
You're being made to believe that they are. No one cares what GCSEs you did, but you're made to believe that these decisions are so fundamental and so massive, and actually you just need to stay happy and get to the other side.
Yeah.
And if you did that, then, if you keep being happy, you will succeed in whatever it is that you find. But if you're bogged down with all your sadness or anxiety or whatever, you're not going to find your sparkle, are you? Because you're going to be so distracted with all of those other things. And I think with the education system hasn't been redesigned since it was put in like whatever the Victorian times, and it's becoming clearer and clearer. It doesn't fit majority of the people in the box. It's a very narrow field that it fits for, and so I think that then leaves lots of people to feel that they are lesser, and actually it's environmental, not them. But there's go on about that for about 500.
Well, when I was a DT teacher, I felt very lucky because I was one of the few subjects where people would come in and they would be, I wouldn't be standing at the front of the class, getting them to write stuff down or answering questions or reading out of a book. We'd be either drawing, sketching, researching stuff, fun ideas and whatnot, developing designs, talking about designs, and then making stuff.
And
then
probably had a lot of
evaluating it.
kids who, for the first time, the only teacher that probably was like, "You're really good at this. You're amazing." Because a lot of kids, people are quite rude about DT.
Yeah, absolutely.
It has probably about the teachers of it, and also certainly about the pupils of it. And it's like that really undervalues the idea of like the importance of like physical making. And seeing how we are now and the age that we're in now, the ones that are laughing are the ones that can change the plugs, can plumb in the house, that can can fix your it's like all those people that are like used to be told that you're the other one, that you're not as higher up in the society's view of you or whatever. They're all the ones laughing. The people that can make things with their hands are the people now, I think, that are like, you can't recreate that. I mean, obviously you can get machines that, but you still had to have somebody to design it.
You still
have to know the understanding of the material capabilities.
Yeah, exactly.
And have the thought of it in the first place. And I think like it baffled me recently that I didn't realise that not everyone can see a design in their head, spin it round, flip it, look at the back, look at the front. Like my mum can't see pictures. I was like, what? You can't, and it's sort of, I forget that not everyone can see things like my brain can, and I think that's the thing. When you have all of these amazing people that can make and do, we're all going to be the ones laughing.
Well, I hope so. I think you are right. But it was certainly an interesting time because I'd have kids that other teachers would say, "Oh God, you've got so-and-so in your class, nightmare." And they come into my class, they'd be the best in the class. And they'd do it for A-level and get A star. It's a number system now, I think, isn't it? But showing my age, but they'd come and they'd get A stars. Some of those kids I'm friends with now, I say they're kids, they're probably coming up to in their 30s now. Some of the first ones that I taught, the older ones, and they're just like good people who are doing well and are happy.
Yeah, and who just didn't fit that box. Yeah, and I think you need people like yourself in that moment, that you just need someone to see you and be like, I know you're not that person that everyone believes that you are. It's just the environment, and if you can unlock that. And again, in the education system, like taking out things that are creative is so bonkers. I know that it's like difficult to quantify, which is why they're so squeezed that you have to, but that's to do with like funding and everything else.
Got to tick the box, make the numbers work.
Yeah, but it really does, at all of those times, where is the place where they succeed? If you're taking all the I was crap at exam. I can't remember. I don't have a memory. It doesn't exist. I never had one. But I have a tactile memory. I can remember feelings. I just can't remember all the details. And I think that so I can't sit in a room and recall information. That just isn't something I can do. But I can build stuff and I can make things. And it kind of, I don't know, it really undervalues that skill. But also then, where are the times where you're made to feel good? If all of the systems are that you do that. And I think if you're not shown that you are able and you're good and you know what that feeling feels like, you're going to go out of school, be like, what's the point? And it's madness that they kind of, I don't know, that disconnect with euphoria and joy and making and stuff is being taken out. And then funnily enough, people come out and not very happy.
Yeah. Well, my kids both at the moment are not loving school. Yeah. One's in secondary school, one's at the top of primary school. And they both come home and ask them about the day. They're like, do we have to go to school tomorrow? And they're just disengaged with it. And I don't think it's necessarily anything that's going wrong. I don't think there's any trouble at school or anything like that, but they're just switched off to it.
Well, there's a disconnect with play. There's a massive, like play is for little people. And then when you learn, formally sitting, and doing it in this kind of structured manner. And I think having that, like my brother's a educational psychologist, and we've talked a lot about that. And he's like, there's just the amount of learning that goes on in play and playful environments, like it's far more than you kind of understand. And I think the seriousness of those settings don't allow for like creativity of thought or difference. And that is the problem. I think when you're making as well, like there is no one way. If there was one way, we'd all know what the rule book was, but there isn't. And the point is, when you have innovation and change, it's because somebody thinks differently and does things differently. And that's really exciting. And that's how you but that's where mistakes are made as well. Mistakes often lead to, discovery. But if you're not taught that mistakes are bad, which predominantly within a school setting, they are not a good thing. Again, that's where play comes into it. Play allows for failure and creativity of thought and stuff. And if everything you do is about being right, then it shows that there's being wrong, and that's bad, and it doesn't allow those moments of discovery and stuff, which I think I like most of all in making. Is that I don't know what I'm doing, but I like not knowing, because actually I think if I know too much about what I'm doing, I'm already a bit bored. I'm just I don't really want to know. I kind of want to know like the haze of what I'm doing, and then I can kind of play. And as long as there's always a bit of play and like discovery and making, then I'm in it. I'm really excited. But otherwise, it's kind of it's a bit paint by numbers by that point, isn't it? Yeah, I think it's kind of a bit boring.
It's interesting that you say that, actually, because sometimes a lot of the commercial work we're doing now, we'll get a drawing and we'll have to make that drawing into our own drawing and then make it from there. And sometimes I think, although I'm not doing all of the making now, I'm kind of like, it'd be nice just to have a real problem to sort out.
That's what I mean, exactly. And I think when there's been problems, I like the fact I don't choose my materials, because I do the commissions for people, places, whatever. So generally the wood is there. And then the problem is the tree's dead. So then I will come and make that not be sad and make it into something that's joyful. And then with that, like there will be rot, there will be bits, there'll be like brick that's grown in it or some like weird railing or something. But then with that, you're sent on a curveball. It sends you off in a direction where you're like, okay, right. And some carvers I know are amazingly good at like realistic, like it's mind-blowing, to the point where actually some of them are having problems because people think that the pictures they're putting up are AI, and they're like, no, I'm just really good at carving. But because there are a lot of AI weird fake carving pictures as well. But I think the kind of being able to respond to the problem is exciting, and actually it ends up sending you in a different direction you didn't expect, and then the shapes that come from it, or like it becomes this feature, or you've had to scoop out so you find the good wood, and then you're like, okay, well that's a form I didn't expect, or whatever. And it kind of, I think that is like, it's always just quite an exciting discovery place, and then it kind of sends you off in another way. But yeah, I think the pressure of like selecting the right wood, and then if it had a problem, it's my fault. It's always that. There's a lot of like stages, which I think it could be quite stressful, but because I make them in the land for people, takes out that element. And it kind of, then it means whatever happens there, the trees come down and it is often a bereavement. You've had this kind of huge, amazing life force that's now this severed lump, and it's quite distressing, and it changes your environment. So if I can come in and change it, then it's already like a nice positive moment.
And when people contact you to commission you, have they got an idea of what they want often, or do they just say, I've got this tree, make something good with it?
Yeah, kind of. I think the people that have an idea, often it's well, sometimes they do, but what I've realised they've done is gone through galleries like mine, or like as if they're kind of going through a catalogue. I'm like, you don't need to tell. My job is to find the design for you. Like, you don't need to I mean, obviously, if they have a really set idea, I'm not going to be like, no, unless it's rubbish. But often, like for me, it's about where it is, who it's for. It's like a collaboration between the land, the place, the person, the history, so like if it was a public commission, it would be like, if it's in a place, it'd be like, what is the building of the place it's in? Like, what's the history? Who owned it? What, so I love reading more into like finding the history of places, and then out of that images will emerge. Or like when it's for private clients, I'm like, tell me your story, show me your things that you've curated in your home. Because often people they're like, oh, I don't really know, and I'm like, I look at their homes and they're really like curvy, or they've got loads of like, I don't know, Indigenous artwork or something. So everyone's got a story. They don't realise that they've curated their spaces accordingly. And I think when you start pulling that out, they say they want an owl. But I'm like, but do you? Because actually, look at all the stuff you've got around that's really cool. And then through that, I can kind of basically make it more fun for me and for them. And then it's like a specific commission for them in their space, and then it's exciting again, and kind of you get to. And also when I do a drawing, it's one face and it's the whole round. So then I kind of allow myself that bit as well.
Do you often do a drawing first?
I do, but it's an expression. It's not a promise for this is what it will be like. Because also you just don't know what's going to happen. Like if you come across a massive hole, then you're like, it's not going to work. But the drawing is like, are we on the right lines? And then within that, there's like space to evolve within it. Within the parameters we've already set
it's
up.
It's a design intent.
Yes, exactly.
That's
that.
What a lot of the designers we work with, they're like, well, it was a design intent.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good one.
Right. It's what we intended
it's going
to
look like it. I just said, this is the feeling. I guess it's like having a mood board, but just a bit more of a drawing of it.
Living with ADHD.
Yeah, it's fun. It's great. You're really good at keeping in the straight line thinking.
You've spoken about it, quite publicly.
Yeah.
You're a champion of dyslexia and ADHD.
Yeah.
How much do you think that has defined you as a person?
A lot more than I realised. Way more. I've started working with this psychologist, and I hadn't realised how intrinsically linked my brain labeling is to how I live in the world. And like things like she's talked to me about like dyslexia and stuff, and how, even the idea of like flipping letters actually is a real indicator from dyslexia about like your perception of space in, positively and negatively, and like how things can be, how this can fit into that sort of thing. And so it's an amazing thing that people see a lot of like, or the language is often about the deficit within whatever neurodiversity you have. But actually, I think, yes, it's hard. There's lots of other things that, I'm not very good at adulting and all that shit, but stuff. But the other things that come with it are that I get to think in a way that I didn't realise lots of other people, don't think. And I didn't know that because all of my friends think in the same way. So I thought it was almost normal until you start talking to other people. But yeah, I think there's a lot of things about being, having a neurodiverse brain allows you to think in a way that is really fun. The pictures that come up in your head and the things that you think of, and, you go on random tangents and all sorts of things. Like I think it just makes things quite interesting. And I realised as well, that's what I can't do things that are really boring. And it does mean that some things it's probably quite annoying to watch people, but you just have to do things sometimes. I'm like, but I can't. But it does also mean that I do things that bring me joy, and I can only really do things that bring me joy because I just can't bring myself to do stuff that doesn't. But it does mean that you're quite truthful with your like what makes you happy and how things, and if you can do that in a way that allows you to access work as well and do things that are fun, then hopefully those two together make quite an interesting life. So, but yeah, I felt like a while ago when I realised I had ADHD, I was like, if I don't talk about it, then I feel like I'm ashamed of it. And then I feel like, but I'm not. But then it felt like I was like coming out. I was like, I need to announce. Well, I didn't really want that, but like, I just feel like there is a lot of negativity, mainly not actually about the people that have it, mainly about other people talking about it, or people, the perception of it and stuff. And I do think, like, I realise obviously why I didn't last at school was probably the ADHD, and why I couldn't really sit in situations that were really overstimulating, really uninteresting and very difficult. And if I don't have a memory, it's like I can't concentrate on a subject I have zero interest in. And I also can't do things that seem completely pointless. I'm not going to use this. So doing something that is like illogical and, in my mind, a waste of time is like ripping my skin off. I can't. I mean, I probably could if I had to force myself to do it, but at what cost? You know, and I think the cost was everything else was falling apart. And I think if you're, you know, it just is not very helpful. And I now realise obviously why that was the case. So I'm just really grateful that I've got to the other side without a criminal record, without anything, like, you know, I have a marriage, I have kids, I have a job, you know, it's amazing. But there's a lot of people that don't. Yeah. And I think that is also to do with, like, I was really lucky. My family fundamentally instilled in me and believed themselves that I am worthy, I am a good person, and I am worth the effort, you know. And if you don't have people around you making you feel like that, and you believing that yourself, why would you succeed? Of course you're not going to, because it's like life's hard, it knocks you a lot. And if you've got that like internal core of belief, then you can kind of go, yeah, okay, fine, I'll sort of carry on and try. But if you don't, then you're like, and if you're doing things that you're like are quite out there, you know, making, you know, trying to make a path for yourself that's not the norm anyway is a bit shaky. And you're like, you do lose your confidence quite a bit anyway. And then if you're not believing in yourself, of course at some point you're going to go, oh, it's a stupid idea, I'm not going to, you know, why would I think that was ever possible, you know. I think you've got I don't know how you get to the other side having that internal belief, but I'm bloody grateful that I managed to. And then, you know, it's allowed me to kind of keep doing things that are fun and discover. But there's a lot of people that have not had that same, you know, lucky whatever, not break, but, you know, the same luck or childhood or whatever. But
it's quite interesting because I think a lot of people, creative people that have been on this podcast, you know, whether they say it or not, it's very clear that they are neurodivergent of some description. I think actually there's a huge link. I don't know what the numbers are, whether it's even possible to quantify or not, but I would say a huge percentage of people that are creative are in some way or another neurodivergent.
Yeah, it's disproportionate for sure. Same as like when I went to university, they were like, oh, 30% of you have dyslexia, 30% of you will have, and then the rest, you know, whatever, probably have something else. But it was kind of a given that we all knew that, like, you know, 2/3 of us definitely were dyslexic, or will discover throughout the studying of it that we are. And that it was kind of like, it was so normal. And then outside of that, it seems like people go, oh, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I mean, I was talking to my friend, the psychologist, about it, and we were talking about, I wonder if it's about that heightened sensory feedback, about why there's a lot more creatives who are more neurodivergent, because there's that, you know, whatever version you are, or whatever shade, or whichever dial's turned up or whatever, means that you kind of have a sensory feedback that's in a different manner to maybe a neurotypical person, which is why materials irk you, intrigue you, or, you know, sounds or smells or what, I don't know. I think they're kind of, there's probably a link between that kind of sensory experience and, you know, creativity probably. But I don't know. We're trying to explore that at the moment, actually, and trying to we're doing some research on it and want to do a project with it about it, just because I think there is a huge link for sure, but it's difficult to unpick.
Well, you've basically got to go inside the minds of creative people and somehow understand exactly what they see feel and think in a circumstance, and then get them to explain that to you?
Which is difficult. And also, every one person is one person. So your version, my version, your shade, that is like, there's no one, it's like a dialing, isn't it? It's like which one's, everyone's version of it is all tuned and dialed up differently. So there's not really, it's quite a difficult thing to explore. But I think there's just is that understanding that the creatives definitely seem to have a different way of experiencing life in whatever way that looks like. And and I think that it's very exciting.
But I think also if you are neurodivergent, the thought of going into an office and working at a computer every day is not the one. So I think that probably people that become creative, or even go into manual trades and stuff like that,
for sure.
chances are is because that whatever it is that they've got going on tells them that they need to be doing something to stop them getting bored.
It's a very unnatural situation for most people, I would imagine, to be in. Isn't like sitting one of the most dangerous things in the world? It's like, it's so bad for your health, and it's like, we're not designed for that way. We've kind of created this way of being that's so sedentary, and then we wonder why everyone's so sad.
It's true.
Because even when we maybe had, like, even when you were like, richer and older days or whatever, you'd do stuff. You'd still have to go and walk somewhere. You'd still have to mend, or you might not mend something, but there would still be like physical activities that were just part of life. And I think people nowadays are like trying to re-implement like hobbies. But then there's a problem of like the visual. And I have so many clients who are like, oh, I'm not creative. And I'm like, I bet you are. It's just that you don't feel confident to show people. And that is so different. Like the act of creativity, of creating, is so different to displaying things. Like, and I always say to them, like, make something, just burn it. You don't need to show anyone. It's like when you're making, it's about the act of making. And they're like, the importance of that. It doesn't mean that you then have to photograph and put it on Instagram, because that's a completely different thing. But the actual like act of making or creating or chopping an onion or whatever it is like, that's the point, is the act. And I think that kind of that like having it to be a hobby means that you also then, if you talk about it, then people want to see it, and then it's that pressure of others, and actually that's a completely separate thing. I think that people have kind of lost of creating for creating's sake.
It reminds me of a story. A good friend of mine, Andy, he's been on the podcast before. He's an incredible artist, and he's got a little unit in Hove, and he just sit there and he does these incredible paintings of like stick men and stuff like that. And some of them are huge, like 3 meter canvases and stuff. And he just, when he's finished, he just puts them in a drawer.
Yeah.
And he keeps pushing himself to do open studios and stuff. And but before he was doing that, someone walked past his studio, saw him paint, said, "Oh, this is great. What else have you done?" And he was like, "Oh, nothing really." And then she opened the drawer and said, "Oh my God, this is amazing. Can I buy it off you?" And he's like, "Oh, nah." And he kept this, and his joke is, I kept everything in the drawer, because he just loved the painting. But it was the confidence thing to be able to say, well, maybe I think a lot of artists, a lot of creative people will love the expression of that creativity, but hate the interaction that you've got to have with someone afterwards. Whether it's to sell it or get someone's feedback, or be then open to potentially negative feedback. And
but I mean, it even from like that, but even not from being an artist, I think even just day to day, it's important to create and not feel like you need to be the artist. I think every creative person, whether they admit it or not, probably has a huge amount of self-doubt and
of course,
disbelief and kind of stuff. And I think it's very, I'm in a funny, I don't know what you're like. I really dislike when I'm like being complimented, and I feel I'm like, oh, I don't really like it. And I think as part of that is that I just don't know what to do with my face. Firstly, but also I don't really believe it. But then I think retrospectively, you look at what you've done and you go, oh, okay, I can see that I have done quite a lot, and some of them are quite good, but it's it still doesn't, I think, because if you're just doing you, it's hard to believe when people say that you're doing something well.
It's true though.
Because
you're
like,
true.
I'm just living and just doing, and then
doing the best I can.
Yeah, exactly. And then it kind of feels funny if anyone says anything, but yeah, but even I just think the actual doing, making. We used to mend things. We used to darn things. We used to create. If something was ripped, you'd embellish it with like flowers or something, just to kind of like make it look nicer. Or I think a lot of people have lost even that, and then are trying to kind of claw back, which is really important. But and I think like I've said before, someone else was talking about my work, and I realised how mindful it was, and how all-encompassingly present you have to be, and there's no thoughts, nothing else. You can't think of anything else. It's just this, like, you're in the moment of making, and that's what people strive for who are, when they're stressed, they're like, oh, what you need to try and do is try and instigate these mindful moments. I have that every day.
Do you know what though? It sort of sounds, you'd think that holding a chainsaw and having sawdust flying at you at 100 miles an hour doesn't lend itself to mindfulness, but I totally get it. Because you're in that moment and you're watching your creation kind of come to life. But from an outside perspective, I wouldn't have necessarily picked that as the thing that I would do to have those mindful moments.
But you've got to, because you've always got to be thinking like, where you're cutting, where is the end of the bar, what's happening where that end of the bar is, how far has it gone in, what's happening. You've got to be thinking about the back at the same time as the front, as to where that goes in. You're always having to think about the cuts basically, and where it would be and what would happen all the time. And so you're kind of, I think my brain is that's when it's like at most peace, because I'm sort of just figuring out all the time all of those things, and you're listening to the saw and you can hear when you've met the cuts, and there's all that kind of thoughts going on all the time. And I think that means that you're just purely in that moment, and also think, where's the kickback, where's it going, if it's going to hit me in the face or like whatever. So you're kind of always having to measure up all of those things at the same time as also going, does this look crap or not, whatever. So I think you do have to be incredibly present, which is it's one of the summers, like after we did filming and stuff, it was my husband's time to work, and I was like, okay, I'll do the summer with the kids. And I was like, by the end of it, I was like, why do I feel so blue? And I realised because I hadn't been carving, and no one had told me I was fabulous. My kids had just told me I was rubbish the whole time. Whereas at work, everyone was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And then also I hadn't had these moments of like respite where I was just in the moment, making, doing it. And I realised how much that is that feedback is really therapeutic. I don't know what therapeutic from, whatever, my brain in life or whatever, but how like rewarding and like freeing and nice that is. And I realised I need to not have 6 weeks again. Not doing it.
Split it up a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Tap in and tap out again at summer.
It's interesting you say that though, because I think my calmest moments are always when I go surfing, and actually probably the bigger and gnarlier it is, the calmer I am, because you kind of have to be, because otherwise the panic sort of takes over. But what I've realised over the years, at times when I've been quite low and been really stressed, it often comes hand in hand with when I haven't surfed for a long time, so I've been busy or whatever, or injured. But then when I go and do it, I could have a really good session, be the calmest, happiest, most chilled out ever, nothing's a problem. And then that feeling will last a week or a couple of weeks or whatever. And it's just a really nice therapeutic thing. But then again, looking at it from an outside perspective, especially the spot that I surf around here, it's like, who the fuck would want to do that, really? When you do, and if people watch and kind of shout over and go, "Oh my God, are you okay?" and stuff. Yes, great. If I put myself in this situation because I really enjoy it, funnily enough. But that's the thing that makes me the calmest, without question.
And that is essentially that moment where you're one wherever you find it, whether it's ragging a chainsaw or, you know, being under a barrel or whatever, it's like some people find it sitting, thinking, you know, whatever. But I think even to have found that you have a way of accessing that moment is amazing, because people try it and try to find it quite a lot, or should try to find it, because I think of how, you know, as you said, the feedback from that goes for days, not just the moment you're in. I think there's a lot about our brains that need stopping and pausing, and, you know, whether it's neurodivergent or whatever, but I think all humans need that, and however you find it. And I do think that's probably where in creating you kind of have that more, and you have that access, and you kind of, you know, you have that kind of feeling. I think as well, there's also that feeling of like, you know, when something is done, there's like, I don't know, that you kind of instinctively know whether it's not or it is. And I think that kind of, I think there's a lot of conversations that you probably have more connected to your body and your senses and that kind of feeling than I think maybe you are if you're doing a spreadsheet. I don't know. Maybe my sister-in-law loves a spreadsheet. She finds a lot of joy from it.
I love a spreadsheet. I have come to realise that I really like being organised because I spent best part of my life being completely unorganised. And now because I'm responsible for, you know, quite a lot of people at work and at home now, I like to see it all lined up. And actually that, talk about being calm, when I know what's happening and how it's happening and I can project and predict everything, it's like, I feel much calmer now. Now I don't have to manage all this chaos. But I still have to manage all of the chaos, but I just know what the numbers are now and what I've got to do and when and everything else. So but
I think that's also comes with like, you've got older and bigger and you've got all of the, you know, there's a lot of things going on and it can't stay in here. I mean, I realised that I was like sinking and I was like, it's because I've got like all of the clients and I didn't have any systems at all. I do have a little spreadsheet, but it's really pants. But it's the same. I was like, who am I working for? Where is their address? Where am I? What is the tree I'm working on? What's the design I've given them? And I had all of these inquiries and I had nowhere. And I was going back through my emails and I was like, you know, and I'd always cock up somewhere because it's not a system and it's horrible. And you then fail and, you know, upset people or whatever. And you're like, and it is a horrible thing. And I think you do, when you're getting more work, you do obviously have to implement stuff. But then that as well is like, I'm like fighting against it because it's not how I operate. But you can't successfully run anything without the back end stuff actually making sense. But that's the problem about being creative or whatever, is like, I didn't choose to be an accountant or a secretary or whatever, but I'm inadvertently doing an awful lot of all of it.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be the ideal person that anyone would pick to do HR, but I think probably quite the opposite. In fact, I give the tough love. But I think that is at least 50% of my job now is, you know, HR. But what I've found has helped me loads is routine. And my wife constantly takes piss out of me now because, you know, I found the routine that I like and I'm a proper man of routine, and I get into that routine. It's so easy because I know what I'm doing. It's the same thing. You know, I have the same breakfast at the same time every day. It's great. It makes me feel good and it sets me up for the rest of the day. It's one less thing to worry about. Whereas she's the opposite. She hates routine, but then she might go, it might get to like 2:00 and she's like, I haven't had breakfast or lunch yet. Like, how you know, and there's this total disconnect between kind of her approach and my approach. I'm like, calm. But
imagine if you both did the same thing all the time.
I'd be so boring.
It wouldn't work.
It'd be so boring. But it was quite interesting. But I was never like that, and I've fallen into this thing of, this routine works. This works for me that day, so I'll implement it as a routine. The same thing with, you know, with work and stuff now. Little things that I do, I go, that works. I'll do that again and again and again. Then all of a sudden there's like 20 things that I'm doing every single day the same, and then I look at it and I'm like, am I becoming that person? Am I going to walk into a room and turn the lights on and off? maybe, probably.
It's working.
Well, some days, yeah, I think some days it is, some days it isn't, but most, I think on the whole, most days are,
Yeah.
they're going all right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned about different types of wood and stuff.
Yeah.
Are there different trees that are way better to work with for carving than others?
Yeah, for sure. Yes, and some that are just really hard and not fun to work with.
I remember when we were filming King's the Wood, or now called Woodland Workshop, you'd often have a big sequoia or redwood or something like that to work on. Is that because it's better to carve, or is it just because of the size of the
it's better and worse in some ways. It's because it's got lots of like antimicrobial properties and stuff. It's really good against rot. There's a lot of things outside that don't work. You know, you've got a lot more access to wood than I do because you get it inside and it doesn't need to weather the world. But I think and the way that it's cut is like, because I'm doing a lot of like down the grain, just because it's often standing up and I'm cutting all that stuff. So there's a lot of like carving ash is just so sad and hard. It's like it just cakes on the saw. It just ends up like you're sort of literally like scraping it off, sort of. I don't know. It seems to, and it blunts the saw really quickly. It's like,
so it's really hard.
It's really hard. Whereas like carving like cedars and those kind of woods are lovely, but then you are unable to get really fine detail. But if you're working big and you're not trying to do too much of the like little bits, because with the little bits they just ping off. The grain's so fat. But I mean, carving things like it's a flip between carving cedar is lovely. You don't necessarily get as good a result as like carving oak. Whereas carving oak is hard. Well, it depends. If it's really green, it's lovely, which most of it is anyway. But so it's a real kind of, it's always a balance really. But I mean, there are obviously some trees where I'm just like, look, this is a waste of your money. There's no point. But if you want to, obviously you can, but it won't last very long. But so it's more like, I mean, yew is just like beautiful to carve, and oak, cedars, those kind of things.
The colours. Like
that's the thing,
the white sapwood and then the red going through the middle
amazing.
And stuff. I found a bit of yew. One of the places that I buy timber from, English Woodlands, I go in there knowing what I've got to buy for whatever project I'm doing. But I walk through, they've got this place called the Timber Rack, and it's just kind of like slabs that they've cut all stood upright. And I walk through there, I tell you, I don't think I've ever walked through that yard without buying a load of timber and then thinking on the way home, what can I make with this? I did it again a couple of weeks ago. I walked in, they had all this yew, and I said, it's probably some of the biggest boards of yew I've ever seen.
Oh, wow.
And he said, the best thing about it, come with me. And we stepped outside the door and looked across the field, and he said, see that little dip in the valley over there? I said, yeah. He said, that's where this tree was.
Oh, wow.
So I thought, it's not bad, in terms of
your mileage or whatever,
or whatever it's called, the mileage. It's literally come from there to there, and then I've driven it from there to there, and then it's going back that way a little bit to my house when I've done something. But I love yew. I think it's one of the nicest timbers. It's annoying because you never get a good enough section size to do anything meaningful in joinery terms. I'll be lucky to get a couple of inches thick, and it almost a straight enough bit to
slow
use,
growing, but it's amazing. I do also love seeing trees. Like if I know I'm somewhere and there's an ancient tree, I will always kind of divert to go and have a little pilgrimage.
Give it a quick nip just in case, might be dead next year and I can get to carve it. Or is it more just an appreciation
just
of the tree itself?
I think there's something that like kind of being near something that's that old and living and I think that kind of I love trees generally. I think they're amazing, and people are like, I bet you'd love to cut that down. I'm like, no, I'd rather not actually.
This is exactly what our mutual friend James was saying. He came on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and I said, what's one of the hardest things about your job? He said, obviously he's an arborist, tree surgeon and stuff, and he said, actually cutting down trees. I'd rather that I didn't have to. I'd rather that they just stayed live. And he said, if you're going into someone's house, quite often it's not a vanity thing, but it's the trees become an inconvenience because it's not letting enough light into a room or something, shading a bit of garden, so they're locking it down. He said it's heartbreaking. You'd much rather this thing just grow and grow and grow.
But it's not always the case. I mean, and that's the thing, is like, obviously the trees have come down for whatever reason, and I think part of what I love is that in a way you get to honour it a bit, You kind of, it's not just become burnt or whatever. Like, I think the same as making furniture or making things out of it. It's like you're kind of giving its life force a purpose and kind of using it to be enjoyed furthermore. I mean, not that the tree knows that, but it feels more respectful. And yeah, like I think that, yeah, I have a lot of connections with trees, and a lot of my clients have too. And that's the lovely thing, is that they're quite often really bereft that this has happened. And it's a really lovely moment. Often I have a big old cuddle at the end of my carving. Well, I can't cuddle my carvings too, but with my clients, because we've shared something. It is personal. It is very much there's part of me left in every tree sort of thing. And it's not just a job. It's a really special thing, and it wrecks my body, and it's really hard, but it is one of those things where at the end we both know that we've gone through something, and then at the end they're like, it's a really nice thing that we've kind of have this moment together, and they're left with this hopefully thing that they like, because because I try to draw them out of themselves and put them into it. It is often super personal and super, not obviously so, but there's always them in it, and it's kind of really nice that it's gone from this bereavement to a celebration kind of thing.
New lease of life.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's very, like when you've cut a tree down, when it's got this life force, and then it's blunt, and it is very abrupt. It's sort of things that shouldn't in the landscape. They're very jarring like that. And if you can kind of change that structure to be read in a way that isn't so blunt, it kind of makes you experience your space a lot nicer. It's a much nicer place to be. And then, obviously, hopefully it brings them joy as well.
Yeah, well, it definitely does. From what I've seen in all of the carvings, you bring a lot of joy to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So where can people see your work? Is there have you got any public?
I was thinking about this. One of my friends who's a carver, Simon O'Rourke, he's got like a map of his. I think he's got like an interactive map somehow that he's managed to. I mean, he's got a lot of carvings, a lot of places. But
do you know? I think I might have fixed one of his carvings on the Travelling Auctioneers and sold it. Actually,
cool.
I think the name rings a bell.
Yeah,
it was a tree with a squirrel running up it and I think it was him actually.
He's amazing. He's really amazing. So my stuff is kind of everywhere. There's a lot of like public stuff. I've done like a Narnia thing in Banstead Woods, which is cute. You can go through a physical wardrobe, part the wooden coats, and go through into the woods, which is fun. And I redid Lucy and the lamppost recently, which is very sweet. Kind of quite a lot of places. I'm doing a lot, moving more, doing commissions for private clients, but I'm also I apply a lot for public commissions more, and various public commissions and stuff. So I think that's where I'm leaning both, but I would like to do more of those kind of things as well, where you have to really, really delve into the history of a place, and it's very much cited into that. So there'll be much more of that, I think, coming up. I've applied for quite a few that's looking quite good.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Excellent. And your Instagram, obviously.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I put lots of stuff on there. Semi.
Yeah.
I don't like to be led by it. I like to put stuff up, but I feel squashed sometimes in my brain from social media. So I do stuff, but I naturally.
I don't. This is the best expression of what sit down and have conversations with people. I actually
and get someone else to edit it.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, I'd never be able to push the button and say it was good enough. But also, I've had to employ someone at work to just take photos and videos of stuff, because I can't do it. I can take a bad photo of some work that we've done, but I'd never post it.
Yeah.
So now I just thought we've got to do it. We're living in an age where it does.
Kind of, but I think what I've also realised, that I do share and I do like it, and I love how I have made so many creative friends that I genuinely are friends from Instagram, whatever. And I've been to lots of places where I'm like, oh, isn't this where you are? Should we go for a coffee? And I genuinely love how it's linked me up with so many other people. But also my clients don't care. That's not who it's for, so if it's for experience of life and enjoyment of sharing creativity, perfect. But as soon as it becomes part of my job, it actually isn't very helpful, because that's not my demographic anyway. So it's sort of, I think it's remembering what the purpose of it. I gratefully don't have a private one, because I don't need you to see pictures of my kids.
Same.
And I think it's sort of quite good that it's like, this is work. If this situation is not work related, it's irrelevant. I don't need to share it. It's not part of it. And it's kind of, I think it's probably my way of managing that. But I think, I don't know. I do love social media, but I do also think, for what? But.
So one question that I ask everyone that comes on the podcast is, what piece of advice would you give to 18-year-old Ella?
Crack on. Probably. I don't know. I think I've been pretty good at just keeping doing things that make me happy. And I think that's probably carry on doing that, really.
That's good advice for anyone,
yeah.
really. Just do the things that make you happy.
Yeah, because
do the things you love.
Also, the thing is, I mean, again, I'm really grateful with my parents, because I didn't need to, I don't need the answers to things as to why they feel right. And I think it's really, obviously, the financial implications of studying or doing things are such that you need to then look backwards or forwards as to be well, what does it achieve? What do you get from it? And actually, I think not knowing the answers isn't a bad thing, but knowing instinctively if it feels right or wrong is actually more important. And I think if you talk to anyone later in their career, actually, when you look at their journey, it looks quite linear, but it's not. And it doesn't necessarily, but it's just because it's all made sense further down the line, sort of thing. And I think that understanding of what the outcome is I don't think you always need to know the outcome, but I do think it's important to know it feels right. And then you'll find out later what the outcome is.
You make your own outcome.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Well, that was really good advice. Ella, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for coming on. And if you want to see any of Ella's work, go on their fleetingly updated Instagram or have a look in Banstead Woods or more places TBC.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Cheers.